Joining me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. He is the co-host of the NBA Pod. He is also a quality editor for Bleacher Report, contributor for Forbes as well. He is Bryan Toporek. He joined us again here on 97.3 ESPN. Bryan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back, Josh.
So before we get to the Sixers, one of the things that stood out to me from last night's doubleheader on the national television games was the more I'm watching, the Bucks lose a couple games recently or Zion have his struggles, I'm starting to wonder, and this is more of a big picture question than a specific question about those two players, but I feel like the league, the coaches, and the league as a whole is getting a lot smarter when it comes to exposing players' limitations than they were in the past. And, maybe it's because players are maybe coming into the league and they're less fundamentally developed than they were before. But I'm getting the sense that teams are finally coming around to the fact that it's less important to just outscore your opponent, but to actually limit your opponent's best players as well.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of the way it's been in the playoffs for a while. The general cliche is in the regular season, you play to your strengths, and then in the playoffs, you really hone in on your opponent's weaknesses and really try to prey on those. I think we're seeing more coaches during the regular season get a little more creative. Nick Nurse has been probably at the forefront of that this season with all the different types of defenses he's been rolling out, but we've seen a rise in zone defenses as well, especially against the Sixers, take advantage, or especially earlier in the year when they didn't have as many shooters, and take advantage of that weakness. So I think you're definitely onto something. With the Bucks in particular, I just wrote about them at Fansided, kind of that how to beat them in a series guide, and this was before the two recent losses against Miami and the Lakers. But I think really the three keys for the Bucks, they give up a ton of threes by design. They built their defense around protecting the rim, so you're going to have to make them pay for that and actually cash in from deep. Giannis has been so good this season, and he's most likely going to win the MVP in a landslide. So you have to win the minutes with him off of the floor. And then, the Lakers showed it last night. If you have enough size on the floor, they have LeBron, Markieff Morris, Anthony Davis, JaVale McGee, Dwight Howard. You have to make life difficult. Giannis is going to get his numbers, but if you make life tough on him, if you hinder their supporting cast, you got a shot.
Not to have recency bias, but I am curious, with them losing now twice in the last several days, did the Bucks to the Heat and now to the Lakers, is there starting to be maybe, whether it's a little wondering or a little curiosity, maybe it's not a surefire thing that the Bucks are the Eastern Conference representative?
Yeah, I feel like that skepticism has kind of been there the whole time, despite their regular season record and what they're doing suggests they should be the overwhelming favorite. They're posting a historic margin of victory. Their net rating is absurd. They have a top 3 or 4 offense, best defense in the league by a mile. So I think part of it is recency bias dating back to last year's playoffs, where they were up 2-0 against the Raptors in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then they fell apart from there. They're better this year than they were last year, so I don't think it's fair to hold last year's results against them. But that said, I think they will go into the playoffs as the clear favorite in the East. Do I think they are as much of a sure thing as the Kevin Durant Warriors from a couple years ago? No, I don't think any team is, and I think that's heading into this season. That's what appealed about this year. There was supposed to be a wider range of outcomes where you can talk yourself into, maybe like 5 or 6 teams are legitimate threats to win it all. I think we thought that window narrowed a little bit to basically the Bucks and then the 2 LA teams, but now we're starting to see it crack open a little more, and you can talk yourself into, maybe there is a window for Toronto or Boston or Philly or Denver, whoever.
Yeah, I'm actually starting to, as you call it, talk yourself into. I'm starting to talk myself into the possibility the Raptors could get back to the NBA Finals, because I think that they still have the size to deal with the Bucks, even though they don't have Kawhi. I think that if the season ended right now, the Sixers are playing the Celtics, and the Sixers have already beaten the Celtics a couple times this year. So it's not like the Celtics are owning the Sixers that they have in the past. There's a possibility the Raptors could be back in the NBA Finals. And, I mean, I don't think Nick Nurse gets enough credit for the job he's done as a coach, as a developer, as a guy who understands how to put guys in a position to be successful. Because at the end of the day, coaching the NBA is just as much about understanding your players as much as it is not screwing up the situation in front of you.
Right, exactly. He's not coaching the most talented roster in the league by far, especially after losing Kawhi. But as you said, that their player development staff as well deserves a ton of credit. They've gotten plenty of contributions out of guys who were either late first-round picks or completely undrafted, second-round, whatever. Turning those guys into legitimate rotation players is a huge testament to all of them.
I made this statement earlier, and I want to think your thought on this. Going back to that draft, Ben Simmons, Brandon Ingram, Jaylen Brown, 1, 2, 3. I'm starting to wonder if maybe Pascal Siakam might be the best player to come out of that draft in the big picture moving forward.
That's interesting. I don't know that I'm there yet, but I can at least see where you're coming from. I still think Simmons ultimately will be the best player. But
okay, now why is that? Because there's a lot of people, our listening audience, who are going to say Ben Simmons doesn't shoot, or they're going to say Ben Simmons isn't aggressive enough, or they're going to come up with some thing that they don't like about his game or about him. So why do you feel like Ben Simmons still has a chance to be that guy?
I think because the focus has been so much on his shooting, and that's really the national narrative especially has been so hyper-focused on that. Before his injury, he had made significant strides defensively this year. I mean, he's a legitimate first-team all-defensive candidate, especially within the past months before he got hurt, when Joe missed a couple games as well. His finishing around the rim was significantly better than it has been ever before. And he was much more aggressive. He was drawing a ton more free throws, which is a huge improvement. And he was actually knocking those free throws down, which, I mean, that was Brett Brown has been hammering that point for years. He's saying, look, he's going to eventually have to shoot threes, but we also need this guy to get to the line and shoot 70+%. And he was doing that. So I think these upgrades to his game are a little more subtle unless you're watching it night after night after night, and you're starting to see he didn't have that move in his bag a month or two ago even. So is he shooting threes? No. I didn't ever expect that to happen this year, despite the pleas and the off-season hype videos. I thought he would take a couple more than he did, but I set the over-under this year on made threes at 10. It's going to take time for that, but if he's rounding out the rest of his game, it's still going to make a difference.
To me, the biggest thing with Simmons, and let me know what you think of this, is that I know Brett Brown wanted to make him a point guard, but I think that his skill set and where he is in his career, he may be just better suited to be a point forward more so than a point guard. Because I remember when Grant Hill came out of Duke, and Grant was a guy who could get assists. Grant is a guy who was a very underrated ball handler. There were many times that he was handling the ball for the Pistons in the late 90s. And I remember Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen was usually the leading assist guy for many of those Bulls teams. He wasn't a point guard. So I will have to wonder with Ben Simmons, maybe if the team got a actual point guard, maybe I don't know if it's Shake Milton. There's a lot of Sixer fans who love the Shake and Bake Milton. But Ben maybe might be closer skill set wise to being in more of the type of the Grant Hills and the Scottie Pippens than he is a per se point guard.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it boils down to is ultimately team construction in general, right? So we're saying this year he has to play point guard because they don't have another better option, and maybe if they did, then he could be utilized more, even like with Draymond Green, where you have a point guard, and then if he's drawing a double, you're going to have a 4-on-3, and Ben Simmons is leading that. He's going to find the right man to read. It's going to lead to an open shot. But ultimately, it comes down to, I think they just need more guards who can create off the dribble. And I feel like we've been saying that all year with the Sixers. They got Alec Burks at the trade deadline, which has been a noted success. And then, as you mentioned, Shake Milton, in Simmons' absence, has really broken out. I mean, I just wrote about him for Forbes yesterday. Like, his emergence is enormous for this team because they're about to be way over the luxury tax threshold. They're going to have a significant challenge keeping this core together beyond next season. So getting a cheap guy like Shake in there who's actually producing, even a rotation caliber player, he doesn't need to start necessarily, but just having him under contract for a couple more years is huge. I think Ben Simmons ultimately would benefit from playing with another guard who can create off the dribble for himself and his teammates, but I think that also will affect the rest of the lineup. Like, I think Tobias Harris is better as a 4 than a 3. I think he's been playing out of position when he's playing next to Horford and Embiid. I think Horford is probably better suited as a 5. I don't think he's a great power forward at this point in his career. I don't think he's got the foot speed to keep up with these stretch fours. So I think basically everyone is playing out of position except for Embiid, which is really making the Simmons fit seem even more questionable than it might otherwise be.
Bryan Toporek joining us here on the Boardwalk Kinda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN, co-host of the NBA Pod, quality editor for Bleacher Report, contributor for Forbes Sports. Looking at the Sixers, and I'm not trying to be a negative person here, but I'm already kind of presuming that this team is not getting to the NBA Finals. So there's a part of my mind that's saying I'm already looking to the offseason, Brian, and I'm kind of wondering, what is the roster reconstruction going to be? Is it, trying to change maybe the starting lineup moving forward and trying to get different players in that lineup, whether that be possibly, attempting to trade Al Horford, or is it, going out there and making, Josh Richardson available, or is it, just saying we'll bring back the whole roster next year with a new coach? Like, what is the more viable option for this team after this year? Because again, I'm really feeling like the closer we get to the postseason, the more I feel like this team is just not destined for a finals run.
Yeah, I have the same gut feeling as well, and I would say the coach is the first obvious domino to fall. I don't necessarily know that it's fair. I think Brett Brown's done an incredible job given the circumstances throughout his entire tenure, but he's going to just be a fall guy because the front office built a roster that made no sense. And it's unfortunate, but I mean, just ask Kenny Atkinson. That's how the NBA goes these days. So I think that's the obvious one to fall. I think a lot of Sixers fans would love it if they could trade Al Horford. I don't think it's going to be as easy as Sixers Twitter would hope. He has 3 years remaining on his deal.
Come on, man. If I take off the limitation settings on NBA 2K, I can make any trade happen.
I know. I think basically that's what you're going to need to do because he's got 3 years. I think $81 million left on the contract, $69 million guaranteed. The problem is all of these teams are saving cap space for 2021, which is when Giannis could become a free agent, LeBron, Kawhi, Paul George. Maybe they don't become free agents, but a lot of teams are at least saving cap space in hopes that they do. So if you're trying to make a team give up $26-ish million in cap space in 2021, you're going to have to give up a premium asset. I think it will take at least giving up Matisse Thybulle and probably another first-round pick. I don't know, maybe protected in some capacity, but I think it's going to be really challenging to get off of him. But as you're mentioning, and I started digging into this today because it's just out of curiosity, the big looming problem, if you're looking down the line, is 2021, which is when Josh Richardson is a player option that he is all but certain to decline. They are basically with 7 players. They have 7 players under contract that summer. They are already $15 million away from the luxury tax line. So if you even just include the bare minimum of what they could spend, it's going to be prohibitively expensive to keep Josh Richardson in the fold beyond next season if they also have Horford, Harris, Simmons, Embiid. So I think ultimately this group at most has 1 more year together, and then they're going to have to make some substantial changes. I don't know which domino falls first, and I mean maybe they trade Richardson to get off of Horford if a team is interested in him and wants his bird rights. That's an option too, but yeah, I mean, I just don't see a way they keep this particular group together for more than next season.
during this stretch of games without Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, is there anything we can take away from that stretch, whether it's the play of Shake Milton or Tobias Harris finally being assertive, or is there anything coming out of this stretch of games? Because we believe that Joel Embiid will be back next Wednesday, Ben Simmons probably before the playoffs. So is there anything we can take away from this stretch of games where these guys are playing that can be applied when the playoffs come around?
Yeah, I mean, Shake is the obvious one. Brett has come out and said, he went into his little hibernation during the All-Star break, and he came out and told Shake, you're not going to be in the rotation. And then these injuries happened. Shake's moved into the starting lineup, and now there's no way you take him out of the rotation. So he has the skill set that you ultimately need, as we were talking about earlier, alongside Ben Simmons in particular. Just need guys who can create off the dribble and hit open shots. And Shake's been doing that. So I think that is something, looking ahead to the playoffs, that could translate. Horford the other night against the Kings played one of his best games of the season. It's been very up and down for him this year, mostly down, not too many ups. But if he can get some confidence back and get rolling, see some open threes fall like he did early in that Kings game, hopefully at this point, that's all they can ask for. When Simmons and Embiid come back, I think Harris and Horford and Richardson will naturally fall down the offensive hierarchy a little bit. But again, if these guys can just get their confidence up, Mike Scott too, he's been playing great this week, and he's been, I love the guy to death, but he's been a disaster for most of the season. So if it's just a psychological, getting back into the rhythm, hitting threes, and remembering you are a good basketball player who was paid a lot of money for a reason, even if you are in a smaller role than you expected, that's all they can hope for at this point. There's nothing, as you said, there's really nothing so far this season. The home record's been great, but they're going to not have home court advantage at any round of the playoffs, most likely. So there's no reason, based on what we've seen so far, to think the Sixers are destined for a deep playoff run. But maybe this thing comes together in the next month and they surprise us all.
Bryan, one more before I let you go, and I appreciate your time today on 97.3 ESPN. LeBron James last night, I'm watching the game, and there's a part of me that says it's not just impressive how everything he's doing at his age, being in his mid-30s, especially coming from someone myself who's in my mid-30s, so I know the physical limitations of being in your mid-30s, so to see LeBron out there is incredible. But, it's also the fact that when I'm watching LeBron, the fact that he's got all these assists, he's leading the league in assists, and he's the first. I did a little research. I threw the stat out there on Twitter earlier this week, and if you want to, you can go and steal this if you want. LeBron is scoring, has the most assists per game in the league for a non-guard since Wilt Chamberlain had 8.6. It's incredible how few guys who are not guards actually average this many assists. And it's almost like there's a part of me that looks at LeBron, and it's almost like he's trying to tell everybody, I'm so good of a passer that I can do this infinitum. I don't need to be the number one scorer on the team unless I have to be. But I can be such a great setup guy and a great passer that's going to be the key to my longevity. I'm going to evolve into this elite assist guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been, he's dating back to his high school days, he has always said he likes passing more than scoring. And that was the knock on him for so long. That was the Skip Bayless types who would destroy him because he would pass up. You didn't know the Kobe gene. He wouldn't take the last shot because he would pass to an open teammate, which was objectively the correct decision. If you're just going on an expected, what is going to happen, how many points do you expect to come out of this, he was making the right play. Whether you had to live or die with the results, and it's not in your hands, but it was the right decision. And now he teams up with Anthony Davis, who is the best player he's ever played with. He played with Wade and Kyrie and Bosh and Kevin Love. You can argue Wade is up there, but he was already starting, kind of on the tail end of his prime when LeBron and Wade teamed up. This is Anthony Davis in his prime. We are being reminded on a nightly basis how good he can be. And LeBron came into this season and said, look, this is your team. I'm deferring to you. You need to be the leading scorer of this team. I'm going to be the table setter because we don't have that other guy. I mean, that he's looking at this roster and he's correctly diagnosing, guy could put up 35 a game, but who's going to create shots for other players? Like Rajon Rondo? I mean, so he knows this is the role I need to play, and it's really a testament to him that he's, going to retire as no worse than the second best player of all time, and he's at this point in his career, year 17, at age 35, still this malleable that he can just say, okay, I'm going to completely embrace this role for this team. This is how this Lakers team needs to succeed, with me being, full on point guard. I'll take over the score when I need to. His dedication on defense during the regular season this year has been better than it's been in at least a half decade. I mean, I think last season the injury was probably his real first brush with basketball mortality. He hasn't really had, that was the worst injury of his career by far. So I think it gave him some time off, first of all. Like, he had been to 8 straight finals. I'm sure the wear and tear got to him after a while, and having a couple months off, no playoffs to recover, refreshed him coming into this year. But yeah, it's, I said earlier, Giannis deserves to be the MVP this year. I know there's starting to be some bubbling narrative about LeBron because of his age. LeBron should be an easy second place, I think, but what he's doing this year should not be underrated just because Giannis has been so dominant as well.
He is Bryan Toporek. He is the co-host of the NBA podcast. Make sure you download and subscribe to the NBA podcast. Quality editor for Bleacher Report, contributor for Forbes Sports. And as all guests, he joined us today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Bryan, appreciate your time on a Saturday and enjoying the games tonight.
Thank you. Happy to come on anytime.